Following the heatwave last week, many places have not been fishing well, and that reflects the lag between the atmosphere and the water. This differs across regions, and for anglers that understand the difference, there are gains to be had. In this video, we'll show you exactly which regions benefit most from these conditions, and how to use this to your advantage. What we do here is look at what the water has actually been through before we tell you anything about the next 7 days. Angling forecasts are 10 a penny, but it's the antecedent conditions that separate a good session from a wasted one. So let's look at the conditions for this week's top 3 regions, starting with the southwest. The warmth load for the southwest sits at 167. That's in the very high band, and it means the water has been accumulating heat steadily over the last 10 days. That's not a spike, that's not a single afternoon of warm weather. That's the sustained thermal build. And in midsummer, on still waters and slower rivers, that changes where the fish are and when they feed. The catchment load, that's at 2.4. It's in the dry band. Very little rain has fallen over the catchment in the look-back period, so the rivers are reflecting that. The cold load, that's 0, it's minimal, there's no cold intrusion, there's no overnight temperature crash, which would pull things back. The synoptic drift, that's reading minus 2.4 for the southwest. The card is negative, which means the pressure has been rising over the lookout period. That's the less favourable antecedent pressure tendency for feeding. Now, as a rule, coarse fish generally respond better to a falling barometer than a rising one. It is worth knowing that the water has been sitting under a stable high, not a retreating one. Now, over next week, the forecast pressure direction for the coming days is a rise followed by a fall. So overall, it's a swing of about 7.5 millibars. That's a picture turning slightly more favourable ahead of the weekend. Now, combining all those into one index, that's the feeding opportunity index for the southwest. The look-back score has been sitting at 73. And places it firmly in the good band across the trailing period, but it has dipped recently following the heat wave. The forecast shows an improving picture throughout the week, so the best time for this region is looking like the early part of next week, before the water has had time to heat up again. Now, contrast that with the northwest. The warmth load here is 152. That's still very high, but it's a notch below the southwest. The water has been warming, but not quite as intensively. The catchment load, that's 9. It's also in the dry band, although it is at the upper end of it. A little more rainfall in the region over the look-back period has occurred in the southwest, which the river levels confirm, so that will likely have stimulated some fish feeding across the region. The cold load, 0 again, same story as the southwest. There's no cold event dragging the index back. The synoptic drift for the northwest is minus 2.2. Again, it's negative. So pressure has been rising throughout the look-back period in the less favourable direction. So it's not dramatically so, but the antecedent pressure tendency has been working against the fishing recently. The forecast pressure direction is generally steady for the days ahead, though. The feeding opportunity index for the northwest, the look-back score has been at 74. Which is in the good band, slightly higher in recent history than the southwest, and that forecast holds that at about 71, which is in the good category. Again, it's a stable line rather than a climbing one, and given the very high warmth load and dry catchment, the index is doing what you'd expect. It's hanging at a decent level without the kind of barometric pressure assistance that would push it higher. So the third region, that's Wales and the Welsh Borders. The warmth load here is 162, which is very high, but it is between the southwest and the northwest values, and it represents a sustained thermal picture across the look-back period. The catchment load, that's 3, it's in the dry band, again very little rain over the region, and the river levels are following suit. Cold load, that's 0 again, so no cold event on record across the look-back. The synoptic drift, it's reading minus 2 for Wales and the Welsh Borders. Negative, so pressure has been rising throughout the look-back period. Same story, same less favourable antecedent tendency, although the magnitude is the smallest of the three regions here. The forecast pressure direction is steady for the days ahead. So the feeding opportunity index of Wales and the Welsh Borders, the look-back score has been 73, it's in the good band. Slight dip following the warm spell, and the forecast takes it to 70, which is still good. And the line is easing very marginally, but it remains in the same band. Now, given the river levels and dry catchment, the index tells you the conditions are workable, but it's not going to be exceptional. So in summary, across all three regions, what the water has been through is broadly consistent. It's a very high warmth load, dry catchments, no cold spells, and it's a rising antecedent pressure tendency that has been working against the index. However, the conditions are improving throughout the week, with the best time looking to be the early part of next week. And the difference going into the forecast period is where that pressure tendency is heading next. The southwest gets a slight falling signal. The other region's slightly steadier. So that's the nuance here. It's why we've put the southwest as leading slightly this week. Right, let's move to the live pages now, and let's scroll through the three featured regions, and this is showing the forecast for the coming week. So the headline verdict is that high pressure is generally dominating. Conditions are firming further Friday into Saturday, and settled fishing is expected all week, with the peak around Friday. The forecast for the week runs to Tuesday the 7th of July, and the temperature range then is between 11 degrees at the low end and 27 degrees Celsius at the high. There's very little rainfall forecast for the week. Peak wind is 11 miles per hour, and frontal activity is suppressed. Now, pressure, as we noted, is rising and then falling slightly, with an overall swing of about 8 millibars. As the weather picture is of warm, dry, it's very calm, with a gentle easing of pressure going into the weekend. River state, the gauge rivers in the southwest are running close to seasonal normal. Now, 4 out of the 6 gauges sampled are showing that, and the river anomaly is very slightly below normal, which is as close to bang on as you tend to get in a dry July. In practice, that means clear water and normal flows. Now, standout region this week is the Dorset Stour at Blandford. It's down to the 5th percentile, which is exceptionally low for the time of year. So this is going to call for stealth. Dawn, dusk windows will be your most productive slots. In clear, shallow water at midday, with that warmth in the system, the fish will be easily spookable. Now, species-wise, on still waters in these conditions, surface and food drift accumulates on the windward bank. Fish will follow that. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday are flagged for that pattern. There's moderate wind generating a surface ripple also helps. It cuts light penetration and gives fish confidence to feed in daylight hours. Again, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday look like the best times. On low, clear rivers, the same logic applies. So it's shade, it's depth, and it's early or late in the day. The forecast confidence, that's high. This is one of the easier forecast calls this week. There's no model disagreement to report for the southwest. So for the northwest, headline verdict is again high pressure dominating. It's settled all week with a pressure peak around Friday. It's a similar pattern to the southwest, but with a few differences in the detail that we need to cover. So temperature forecast ranges from 12 to 20 degrees, notably cooler than the southwest, with some rain throughout the week. The peak wind is 15 miles an hour, and there is reduced frontal activity. The pressure direction is steady. The river state, now rivers in the northwest are averaging about 0.12 metres below normal across 5 of the six gauge sites. That's slightly lower than normal, but it's not dramatically so. Clear water is the likely prevailing condition, and on the named rivers here, that means fish are likely to be holding in the deeper, shadier runs. 2 standout waters is the River Eden at Carlisle and the River Weaver at Northwich, both sitting at the 5th percentile, so it's exceptionally low. It's the same prescription, therefore, as the Dorset Stour. It's stealth approaches, dawn and dusk sessions, and a degree of patience required for bites. In flows that low, the fish are going to be concentrated, so it cuts both ways, really. Now, for most species, the key favouring condition this week is the overcast periods. That's on Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday. Cloud cover is going to be at about 70% or above, and that will extend the feeding windows into daylight and reduce fish caution. So that will trigger, that's the trigger to watch for. Now, on what will largely be a bright, settled week, the cloudy days become disproportionately valuable for many species. Forecast confidence, it's high for the first part of the week, although the ensemble across the models does carry some spread later. And to be honest, the latter half of the week from Sunday onwards is somewhat less certain than Wednesday through to Saturday. If you are planning a session for the tail end of that period, hold that in mind and do check the short-term forecasts. So Wales and the Welsh Borders, the headline verdict is high pressure also dominating, with conditions firming Friday into Saturday. It settled all week with a peak around Friday. Now, this is a consistent theme across all three regions this week. The forecast temperature is ranging from 11 to 25 degrees Celsius, only very little rain across the whole period. Peak wind is at 11 miles an hour. Frontal activity, well, there isn't much, and pressure direction is steady. Now, the river state across this region, rivers are averaging about 0.19 metres below normal, but with only 3 of 7 gauges currently sampled in our database, that means the coverage is thinner here than the other two regions, and that is worth factoring into how precisely you read those numbers. There's no active warnings, but flows are below the 25th percentile at several sites. The fish in this region this week, they're going to be concentrated and holding up in the deeper pools. Now, there's 2 standout waters in this region. The River Wye at Hereford is down at the 5th percentile, and that's extremely low. So the same stealth advice applies. It's early morning, late evening or night sessions are going to be the most reliable route. Approach as carefully as you would for, chalk stream trout, for example. So any sort of spooking is going to be a problem here. On the deeper reservoirs, this is a classic stratified water week with the thermocline well established. So bottom baits will likely be sitting below where the fish are. So we're thinking zigs and mid-water presentations for the carp could well be the call here. It's worth noting that water temperature guidance for this region is estimated from recent air temperature. That's a reasonable proxy, but less reliable on these deep stratifying reservoirs. So take it as a working signal, but not a precise reading. Now, 2 things are pulling in opposite directions this week. There's the overcast periods on Wednesday and Sunday, which favour daylight feeding windows for many species, but for river anglers, it's these low conditions, meaning the fish are spookable and concentrated. The adverse condition is real. It's that summer rivers are below the 25th percentile, and these require a careful approach, and consistent results are more likely early or late in the day. So confidence in the forecast is high overall across this region. Now, as across all the other regions, the back half of the forecast carries more spread in the ensemble, and we're less certain about the fine detail here beyond Saturday. So full details are linked in the description below, along with Midlands, Anglian, Northwest and the Southeast regions, and they're all covered on the site, so check that out. So that's the full picture for the week to the 7th of July. All the regional detail, river gauges and the full feeding opportunity index breakdowns are on the Atmospheric Angling website. You'll find the link below, and every region covered this week has its own page along with fishery level detail. If you want this analysis in your inbox, the free newsletter goes out with each weekly forecast, so do sign up at atmospheric-angling.co.uk. Now, next week we're looking at the possible return to heatwave conditions, and we'll look at the lagged association with water conditions in that video. Now, if that was useful, please subscribe, and we'll see you next week.